And Happy New Year, producer Susan, our first podcast of 2025. And how was your New Year?
It was good. How was yours?
It was great. In fact, I stayed up on New Year's Eve to watch the Penn State championship playoff game.
Yeah,
The
which brought us right up to New Year's.
brothers, actually, I went to bed about 15 minutes. They were so far ahead with a few minutes left. I didn't bother to watch the last 3 or 4 minutes. I didn't figure Boise State was going to score three times in 4 minutes, so I didn't watch the last 4 minutes.
Well, the big one's going to be this Thursday against Notre Dame.
And what time does the game start? 7 o'clock?
7 or 7:30 on the East Coast.
Yeah, so it'll be like another midnight end to the game.
Yeah. And
So
it's a Thursday night, work day.
now, if they win this Thursday, is there another game after that?
Yeah, if we win, when we win, it'll be off to the championship,
On what date?
the 20th, which I believe is a Monday.
Okay, and against the winner of which game?
It'll be the winner of Ohio, I think it's Ohio State and Texas.
Okay.
So wouldn't it be nice if we beat Notre Dame and Ohio State? I think they're playing Texas. It'll be another Big Ten match off.
Wow.
Wouldn't
Wow.
that be something?
Wow. Wow. All right. Well, it's going to be an exciting week then. All right. So we'll get to regroup. We'll talk about this next week. We record this on Tuesday afternoon, so we'll be able to talk about this next Tuesday. Anyway, so today for the first show of the New Year's, I got a ton of clips. Again, it's the situation with Jerzee Joe. It's news and perspective you won't hear on TV. And I have a ton of stuff you didn't hear on TV or that you only heard half of TV. And I'm just loaded down with clips tonight. So I won't be doing a lot of talking, but you'll be doing a lot of listening. You ever heard of a woman, female comedian by the name of Whitney Cumming? Whitney
Yeah,
Cummings?
yeah.
Um, well, she hosted the New Year's Eve special with Anderson Cooper,
Okay.
and she did a 30-second look back on 2024, and you could have seen Anderson Cooper's jaw drop open. And we'll play that clip when she's standing there just slamming how the Democrats bungled the 2024 election.
I
And
admit I did not see that because I was too busy watching the Penn State game.
well, when you listen to it, and if you can see this clip, it'll be in the show notes. Anderson Cooper's looking like I mean, anyway, we'll tell you what, and we'll give you a little more background on that. And in a related story, we're going to play a collection of clips of the Biden administration officials reassuring the American people how mentally sharp President Biden was, even when they knew he wasn't. Um, and by the way, coincidentally, by the way, I was watching Saturday Night Live. They're in winter recess or whatever it was. So this past Saturday, they showed a replay of a show from October of 2023. And in that October of 2023 show, the opening skit was a satire of how mentally feeble the president. So even Saturday Night Live in October 23 was doing skits about the president's mental decline. And we're going to play you a bunch of people saying, "Oh no, he's sharp as a tack," and blah blah blah. So it was just sad that these people knowingly were lying to the American people about Biden's state of his mental state. All right. We all heard about President Biden pardoning people and commuting their sentence, including people
Yeah.
that murdered FBI officials. He didn't
And his
pardon,
son that he swore he would never pardon.
and his son he swore he wouldn't pardon, and he commuted the death sentence of somebody who murdered two FBI agents. Well, there's another one you didn't hear about, and that's why we call this news and perspective. And I'm going to tell you about a female doctor he pardoned that never should have been pardoned, and we'll tell you about that one. In our stupidest thing I've heard all week, we'll tell you how the state of New Jersey has changed the standards of what it takes to become certified as a teacher in New Jersey. I think it's disgraceful what they've done, and we'll tell you what they've eliminated from the certification standards to become a teacher in New Jersey. You may or may not have heard the story about a postal worker who was stabbed to death by another patron at a deli in New York City last week. They were both in there ordering lunch, and they got into a dispute and this other patron stabbed him to death. And we're going to tell you how the media reported the identity of that person and why what they told you about that person was a lie. We'll share with you a summary. By the way, and here's something I do every year in January. There is a website called the Officer Down Memorial Page, which lists every officer who died in the line of duty in the previous year. And many of them, natural causes, some were traffic accidents. But unfortunately, about 50 every year are literally intentionally murdered. And I do a summary of these police officers, how many were murdered, how they were murdered, and the demographic of the people that murdered them. And I'm going to share with you those demographics later on in the podcast. Of course, the big news story was the terror attack in New Orleans last week on right after New Year's Eve. It was the on the early in the morning on January 1 that killed 15 people and injured 35. And what that terror attack has to do with the liberal movement that is trying to ban so-called assault rifles, and I'll make the connection why there's a connection between those two. And also CBS did a story. You ever go to Starbucks like in the summer and you get like a cold drink in one of those clear plastic cups?
Yeah, yeah.
And they've got a special trash can there called the recycling. It's called recycling. You're supposed to put your clear plastic cup in recycling.
Hmm.
Did you see the CBS special and what happens to that cup when you put it in there?
Uh, I'm gonna guess it probably just goes in the trash. Sadly.
Unfortunately, you're correct. And we'll tell you how CBS proved that. And our taxpayer relief shot, if we have, hopefully have time, comes to us from Ohio, where a woman is on the phone with the 911 operator saying, "There's a man trying to break into my home, our home. My husband's got his gun." And while she's on the phone with 911, you hear the gunshots. All right. So let's start with this Whitney Cummings. And again, she's out in the cold. She's in her coat. She's Anderson Cooper. They're both standing outside near the Times Square ball drop. And this is going to start with a couple of people looking back. And then they're going to cut to Anderson Cooper and Whitney Cummings. So here we go on this clip.
Well, we hope you enjoy 2024's New Year's Eve roast. No, we're not talking about the food. We're talking about comedian Whitney Cummings, who went after President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris on CNN's New Year's Eve live special with Anderson Cooper and Andy Cohen. Let's watch.
2024 election fried our brains. The Democrats couldn't hold a primary because they were too busy holding a body upright.
Couldn't hold a primary because they were too busy holding a body upright. Remember Weekend at Bernie's?
Yep.
No, that's only the first part of it. And Anderson Cooper's like his jaw is dropping. I'm going to back that up. Here we go.
Comedian Whitney Cummings, who went after President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris on CNN's New Year's Eve live special with Anderson Cooper and Andy Cohen. Let's watch.
2024 election fried our brains. The Democrats couldn't hold a primary because they were too busy holding a body upright. Are we still rolling? Am I off?
Go for it.
It was amazing that the pro-choice party didn't give their voters one when it came to the presidential candidate. Kamala was forced on us so hard you'd think she was patented by Pfizer.
Forced on us so hard, you think she was patented by Pfizer, obviously allusion to Viagra.
Or Moderna, whichever one's. Oh, God. Andy just gave me a fling. Am I off?
Go for it.
It was amazing that the pro-choice party didn't give their voters one when it came to the presidential candidate. Kamala was forced on us so hard you'd think she was patented by Pfizer or Moderna, whichever one's. Oh, God. Andy just gave me a very scary look.
I thought that was hilarious because neither one of them. That was Andy, what's his name from the Real Housewives series? What's his name? Andy Cohen.
Oh yeah, Andy Cohen.
So it's Andy Cohen, Anderson Cooper, and Whitney Cummings, and she's just rattling on. And this is hilarious. And they're standing there looking at her like, what? I just thought that was hilarious. So anyway, what did you think of her assessment?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that clip to actually watching that because, like I said, I didn't watch Saturday Night Live that night because I was or New Year's Eve.
Well, no, that was
at New Year's Eve. Yeah,
that was New Year's Eve. I got the Saturday. I don't have the Saturday Night Live clip, but if you Google October, whatever it was of 2023, you'll see that one where they open with this skit of Biden's mental decline. But on that note, let's move on to that clip. So here's a compilation of Biden administration officials throughout last year trying to reassure the American people how mentally sharp President Biden is, even after shows like Saturday Night Live were telling, even they that which were, Saturday Night Live is obviously favor, media bias, liberal. Even they had to break down and said, hey, he's in decline. Here we go.
Does the president have the stamina, physically and mentally, do you think, to continue on even after 2020?
This is Kareem Jean-Pierre.
Over my gosh, he's the president of the United States. I can't even keep up with it.
The most difficult part about
Alejandro
running for
Mayorkas.
President Biden is preparing for it, because he is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
I can testify because I've been working very closely with this president for the past 2 years. I've been knowing him for 30 years. And I'm telling you, this guy's tough. He's smart. He's on his game.
Joe Biden has vision. He has
Nancy Pelosi.
He has a strategic thinker.
The president is focused. He's detail oriented. He's always thinking about the big picture.
He is engaging. He is capable. He has an incredible record as president.
And I'm often with him on foreign
Janet Yellen.
He's at the top of his game. So he has a vision. He has knowledge. He has judgment. He has a strategic thinking.
I met with the president about
Bernie.
5 or 6 weeks ago, and he seemed fine to me.
I have complete confidence in the president.
Merrick
I
Garland.
have watched him expertly guide meetings of staff and cabinet members. I could not have more confidence in the president.
I would just tell you that I meet frequently with the president, and every
General
single
Mark
time,
Milley.
He is just fine.
But he is, again, knowledgeable, wise.
Incredibly sharp, incredibly probing, incredible command of the details.
He is sharp. He is on top of things.
There is nothing to these challenges, these suggestions that somehow he's not sharp and he's not capable.
We see Joe Biden up close. We know how attuned he is to the issue.
And you're going to see how smart he is and the experience he has.
His wife, Jill Biden.
His age is an asset.
He's wise. Yes, he's wise. He has wisdom. He has experience.
And his experience, because of his age and his wisdom, has been invaluable to this country.
A lot of countries, people who've been in office a longer period of time are praised for their wisdom.
I have seen a lot of 72-year-olds not as capable as this 80-year-old.
It is hard for us to keep up with this president.
His mental acuity is great. It's fine.
Chuck Schumer.
It's as good as it's been over the years. He's fine. All this right-wing propaganda that his mental acuity has declined is wrong.
And this kind of sense that he's not ready for this job is just a bucket of BS that's so deep, your boots will get stuck in.
So those people, what they did, they only showed him from the waist up because most of them, their pants were on fire. I mean, how can anybody who had observed him at, his very few press conferences and speeches, turning to shake hands with people who weren't there, having to be led off the stage. I mean, do you think any of those people that actually believed a single word of what they were saying?
Sadly, I think that they do.
Oh, my goodness.
I do think that they believe it.
I mean, but you and I saw him, right?
People like, for example, Bernie Sanders. I mean, he's such a socialist at heart. And he's up there in age too.
Well, Bernie just said, well, I think Bernie was more muted. He said, I think he's just fine. That's all Bernie said.
And Bernie himself, he probably thinks he's just fine. And I don't know how old he is, but he's up there in age.
He's up there too. Oh. Anyway. So I think that was kind of related to Whitney Cummings. They spent the whole year propping him up, which is exactly what they were doing. By the way, I got to fix a typo here in my notes. Now, let's talk about Biden. Now, we've already, heard the stories about Biden pardoning people, commuting the death sentences of people who killed FBI agents. Here's a story you didn't hear. Among the people pardoned by President Biden 2 weeks ago was a female doctor who defrauded Medicare by only giving her 1,500 cancer patients a portion of the chemotherapy drugs that had been prescribed to treat their cancers, but then billing Medicare for the full dosage amounts. Now, she was only sentenced to prison for the financial crime, of which, by the way, was $8 million. She defrauded Medicare out of $8 million. And no attempt was made to determine if her practice of not administering the full prescribed amount of those chemotherapy drugs had ever resulted in untimely or unnecessary death of those 1,500 cancer patients. Now, what she would do, she would take the full chemotherapy dose, she would take half out of the bottle, she would inject it into some saline solution. So if you were being treated for cancer, breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, whatever, you only got half the dose. And typically when you do chemotherapy, It takes place, it's multiple treatments over a period of months. What do you think the chances are that at least one, if not more, of those 1,500 people um, didn't you had their died from their cancers because they were not given the full amounts of their
Yeah,
drugs?
that's horrible. That's absolutely horrible.
Horrible. I mean, absolutely. I mean, and she did this to 1,500 patients over a period of years. And the judge who sentenced her to prison made it a point of giving her the maximum because he said in his ruling, he said, we were not asked to rule on the inhumanity of what you did and how many premature deaths you might be responsible for, but because I believe you were undoubtedly responsible for premature deaths of innocent people, I'm giving you the max and the financial. Well, Joe Biden pardoned her. Get out of jail free, go home. You don't need to serve out the rest
There
of
have
your
been
sentence.
so many people that he has pardoned that had no business being pardoned.
Right. And I think talk about one. This woman's a doctor. What's that say, doctor? Do no harm. Well, clearly,
Mhm.
by only giving 1,500 patients half the prescribed chemotherapy drugs, this woman was doing harm. And again,
Mhm.
you didn't hear that on TV, did you?
No, I didn't.
That's why we call this news in perspective. You won't hear on TV. Well, that was one. All right.
The one thing I do find interesting is the fact that he pardoned some people for future crimes that haven't happened yet.
Yeah.
Like what? What?
Yeah.
What is this, the Matrix? Is he the part of the Matrix? I mean,
Well, it's not fair. He can't pardon for the future, but no, he can't
for
pardon
crimes that they have not yet been convicted of,
or even charged with.
which then leads you to believe that then must be aware that they've committed these crimes at some level.
Well, I think what they're saying is, oh, he's afraid that Trump is going to go after people and blah blah blah, and so he wants to protect them from malicious prosecution. That's the rationale that he's trying to protect these people from malicious prosecution by the Trump Department of Justice. So uh, that's the rationale. They're called preemptive pardons. When you pardon somebody who hasn't even been charged yet, that's called a preemptive uh, a preemptive pardon, and that's what he's done. So anyway, but that's one I think that woman, since she was never charged or sentenced with criminally negligent manslaughter or medical malpractice, I think she should have served out the full sentence. He pardoned her, but uh, again, you didn't hear that on the news, but you heard it here. All right. You want to move on to the stupidest thing I've heard all week?
What's the stupidest thing you heard this week?
Well, most states, if you want to be a teacher, in addition to having a teaching certification, you have from a college, whatever, right? Most states require that you pass a certification test, which you have to demonstrate proficiency in basic English, sentence structure, basic mathematics, and reading comprehension. You're given about a 4-page short story to read, and then you have to answer questions about, the 4-page short story. Well, under New Jersey Legislative Act 1669, individuals seeking instructional certificates in the state of New Jersey no longer need to pass a basic skills test in the areas of reading, writing, and mathematics. By the way, you don't even need a teach. You don't even need a degree in college degree in education. You can become a teacher now in New Jersey with no college degree, and you don't even need to pass a certificate test in reading, writing, and math. What do you think?
I would let slide that you don't need a college degree in education. However, I think that you should have to have a college degree, and I think that you also need to pass some sort of licensing or certification.
Yeah.
Because
Well, they
I think
said, well,
you
this
can be a good
yeah.
teacher and not have a degree in education, but have a degree, period.
I agree. But, they're saying, well, we had to do this because we have such a teacher. We're having trouble attracting teachers. So we're going to, well, let me ask you a question. Was passing this test a huge roadblock? I mean, how many people were failing this test?
And honestly, if these people were failing this test, I don't want them teaching my kids.
Well, that's the point. So that's why this is the winner of the stupidest thing I've heard a week. If they were failing the test or couldn't pass the test, why do you want them teaching our kids?
Jerzee Joe, when I was in college, in Pennsylvania and in New Jersey, I would substitute teach. And one time I went to college in Pennsylvania, but I was substitute teaching in New Jersey. And the teacher had a bulletin board set up in her classroom, and it was modes of transportation was the title of this bulletin board. And it had boat, horse, car, plane, and the word horse. Now, most people would think with the first thing that comes to mind, even if I didn't say modes of transportation, if I just said the word horse, most people would probably think of the animal, right?
HORS. Let me guess. She had it spelled HOARS, horse,
Yes,
like
as in
sore
horse throat. I have a horse throat. Most people, when you think of the word horse, the very first thing that pops into your mind is the animal, not that I have a horse throat.
Huh.
Even without saying modes of transportation, I was like, oh my God, this woman is teaching our young children, and she doesn't know the word horse.
Yeah, and by the way, I've run into people on
I will
Facebook
never
who
forget that.
no, and I've run into people on Facebook who say they're teachers, and instead of spelling their THEIR, they spell it
And I agree that's
THER.
sinful, but I see that way too common. That is such a common misspelling. Granted, it's wrong, and especially for educators, but to spell some words like that wrong, like the word horse, that
Oh,
is just
yeah,
absolutely awful.
absolutely
And to
awful.
be an educator.
I absolutely educate. All right. Let's move on to, again, this is news and perspective. Well, this is a news story you may have heard on TV, but I'm going to share with you the perspective. Now, for those of you who didn't hear the story, about a week ago, a postal worker, it was lunchtime, he was on his route delivering mail, and every day he stopped at this deli in New York City where you can get a sandwich. You know, delis in New York make you a sandwich. Well, he's in there, and he gets into a dispute with another customer. Um, as to whose turn it was, who was in line first. And I'm going to play you the report by CBS, and then I'm going to tell you what they didn't tell you in this report. Remember, this is news and perspective you didn't hear on TV. So here's the story as reported, and I want you to listen for the words woman and she in this report.
Surrounding the stabbing death of a U.S. postal worker in a deli. Police have identified the 24-year-old suspect who's charged with second-degree murder. An employee also tells.
Whoop, hang on.
I went to Dubai.
Hang on. I screwed up and I double clicked when I shouldn't have.
The latest search for the sexual predator who broke into.
Hang on. I got to start this one all over. Oh, did I screw this one up? Hang on. I don't know what I did, but I did it.
New details surrounding the stabbing death of a U.S. postal worker in a deli. Police have identified the 24-year-old suspect who's charged with second-degree murder. An employee also tells us the two were regular customers who had no history of disputes in the past. Christy Collegian has the story from Harlem.
We're hearing from an employee who tells us exactly how this all unfolded. He says it started right here while the two were waiting in line, fighting over who was first in line. Then that argument spilled over here to where the coffee machine is and got physical. And here's some new video of 24-year-old Jaya Cruz, who police identify as who allegedly stabbed to death 36-year-old Ray Hodges, a U.S. postal worker. And this employee tells us that it seemed as though Hodges was here first, and then Cruz crossed in front of him, and it sparked a whole argument. Here, take a listen to what he said.
I separate them. The male guy in the front, the lady, she was in the back. She's spilling him in his face. And male guy, he get mad. She's spilling him. So he was lemon juice next to the coffee machine. He threw on her. So she took the knife. This is so bad. This is my first time I see this happening from my face.
And this all unfolded yesterday at around 2:30. We also heard from a teacher at a nearby school who says they had to go into lockdown, which is customary for any sort of dangerous situation out here. But of course, it was very scary for her and the nearby community, who was all just shocked over this violent incident that happened right here. And also hearing from the USPS that issued a statement saying that it is looking out for the safety and well-being of its employees, and that it is working diligently with the NYPD.
So, and all over this report, postal worker stabbed by woman. They refer to her as she. Well, guess what? She wasn't a she. And this reporting plan for you took place long after that was a well-known fact. So, she was not a woman. She was a biological man, also known as a transgender woman, but the media never mentions that well-known fact. Here's a quote from the New York Post story that came out actually before that news report. So this was reported before that news report came out, where they referred to her as a woman and she. Here's a report from the New York Post newspaper. Hodges, the mailman, was on the job Thursday when he was senselessly murdered for cutting a crazed woman on a deli line, and they have woman in quote marks. Sources previously told the Post that Jaya Cruz, who has been described by cops as a transgendered woman, had a history of threatening victims with box cutters before, quote, she allegedly killed this father of two. So my question is, why did they keep referring to her as a woman and she when it was a biological male? And the man had testicles and a penis. It was not a woman. And if they want to refer to as why didn't they call her a transgender woman and say that he was actually a male? Can you think why they didn't think that was a relevant part of the story?
In today's society, that I think people, out of respect, now this is a situation where this person, because of the violent crime that happened, maybe doesn't deserve the respect, but I think that people are trying to respect their choices by referring to a transgender woman, a woman or she or her, by using those pronouns, just giving them that level of respect that they are looking for in society.
And by the way, when I first saw this news report, I saw this person, who stabbed the post, is being let out with a cop on either side of, quote, her, and she's 6 inches taller than either cop.
And that's the other thing I was going to say, and most times it shouldn't matter if two people are standing in line at a deli or using a public restroom or whatever. You've probably, Jerzee Joe, you've probably been in a public restroom with a transgender man and never knew it, because it shouldn't matter.
I don't care.
But when it comes time, when we're talking about violent crime, the fact that this transgender woman is most likely, because it was born a man, he is probably larger and stronger than other people around him. And that's where it does really matter, when, especially if you're talking about something like self-defense, like, if this is a transgender woman and they're coming out to attack me, they're probably way more than me. They probably are taller than me. They're probably stronger than me, because they're biologically a man.
Producer Susan, when you see the show notes and you click on this, you will see that this person, I'm estimating, is 6'5" at least. She towers over the two cops.
And that is larger than even like an average man. I mean, Jerzee, you're 6 foot tall. You're an average man.
Right. When I saw this new clip, I said, wow, she must be a basketball player. Then I find out that no, she's a he, but at least 6'5". And anybody else wants to see this, in a day or so, you'll be able to see the show notes, and you'll be able to click on the.
And 6'5" is tall for a man, even.
Yeah, this woman towers over the two police officers, who are not short. She towers over them by a good head. All right. Let's move on to another sad story. The New Orleans terror attack that took place 12 hours after we recorded our podcast that day. 15 people dead, 35 people injured. Now, why am I bringing this up in relation to the liberal call, we need to ban assault weapons? Well, here you have a situation where a guy with no assault weapon, actually he had one, he got in a gunfight with the police, but he was able to kill 15
that's not what
people.
did all the damage.
Right. He killed 15 people and injured 35 in under 60 seconds with no gun. A couple years back in Nice, France, on a Bastille Day parade, another guy drove a box truck into a crowd of people, killed 85 people in under 60 seconds by driving his box truck into a crowd of people in the same fashion. A couple years before that, in the Bronx, New York, Happy Land Social Club, a guy set fire to this. It was a club on the second floor of a nightclub. He set fire to the stairs, killed 86 people in an arson fire. My point is, if you think you're going to stop evil or crazy people from killing other people, innocent victims, just by depriving them of access to a particular type of weapon, you probably also think you can make a balloon smaller by squeezing it in one place. If you want to kill a dozen people and say, well, you can't have an assault weapon, is that going to stop you if you're determined to kill a dozen people? Is that going to stop you?
Yeah, and it's like you can't take a plastic knife on an airplane to cut your rubber chicken.
Right. But the point is, if you can't think of 3 or 4 different ways to kill a dozen people without an
Yeah.
assault rifle, you probably don't have an IQ higher than room temperature. I don't want to give anybody ideas, but I can rattle off several ways to kill a dozen people.
But look, I mean, just Christmas week, the Christmas market in Germany that just
Yeah.
happened, and thankfully nobody else other than the person who was in the car, the Tesla Cybertruck in Las Vegas.
Yep. Yeah, and he, by the way, he only said he said he only put fireworks in it because he didn't want to hurt anybody else. That's why, but that could have been a bomb, by the way.
Yeah.
Hey, we're running short of time. I want to play this thing about what happens when you throw your plastic cup into that special
Yeah.
recycling bill. This is from CBS. Here we go.
Starbucks does with all the plastic cups people throw into their in-store recycling bins. Well, CBS News discovered that most of those cups actually never get recycled. So joining us now to explain is our national environmental correspondent, David Schechter. Good to see you.
Good to be here again.
All right. So tell us about, let's start at the beginning. Tell us about why people think that if they get a plastic cup from Starbucks with their iced coffee, they finish it up and they toss it into the recycling bin, why it's actually not getting recycled.
Well, the recycling bins say, it tells this customer actually to put it here. There's like a little blue bin and it says, please put your cup in here. And so you're setting up the expectation to the customer that it's going to be recycled.
Right.
So what we did is we got trackers and we put them inside like a whole bunch of cups. 36 of these cups had like an Apple tracker in it. We went around the country and you can see where 15 ended up in the landfill, 14 went to a waste transfer station, which is a place that doesn't recycle. And then you have 4 of them that went to an incinerator where they would just burn trash. And 4 of them went to places called material recovery facilities where they would have the possibility of being.
So out of the 36 cups that went into again, they put like these Apple Air tags in the cups. So out of 36 cups, only 4 actually went to a recycling facility. And John Stossel, by the way, does a thing about where he done the same thing with these residential trash pickups where they follow the garbage truck and the garbage truck takes the quote, you pay extra to have a recycling bin. Do you have recycling bins?
I do. We're actually required to recycle in our town.
And he's done this. He did a special where they follow the quote, and you're paying extra for you have a special garbage can and you have to pay an extra fee. Yep. And they follow these garbage trucks and they dump it right in the same landfill. And so again, when you go to Starbucks, the chances are, let's see, 4 out of 36, chances are only 10% that plastic cup you throw in the recycling bin is going to get recycled. The other 90% are going the same place as all the other cups. So that's what happened. So that's what happens to your cup when you put it in the recycling bin. Now maybe Starbucks, who have seen this report, maybe they'll do something about that and make sure. But right now, 32 out of 36 cups went to the landfill or got burned in an incinerator. All right, I know how much time we got left.
You have just under 5 minutes.
All right, real quick. 2024, I'm going to just blow through this. 144 cops died in the line of duty, but some of those were from heart attacks. Some of those were from roadside accidents where, they're hit by a drunk driver. But 48 were intentionally murdered by criminals. And as I've done every year for the past 5 years, I compile a summary of those murders. And again, I'm excluding deaths by drunk drivers and reckless drivers. I'm only doing people who intentionally wanted to murder a cop. And here's what that summary shows. Here's the demographic, the race of the assailant. None of the assailants were of Asian descent. Only 2 were Hispanic. 20, which is 41%, were white Caucasian assailants. And 26, which is 42%, were African Americans, all male. So here's the sad. Now I make, and this is not unusual. This is the same year after year. My question is, why, African Americans comprise 12.5% of the U.S. population. Why do they consistently account for more than 40% of all the cop murders in this country? I don't have an answer.
Caucasian was 41% and African American was 42%. So that's very close. I mean, it's for all intents and purposes.
No, actually, I apologize. I made a mistake. That number, I made a mistake. White assailants were 40. I apologize. Caucasians were 41.7. African Americans were 54.2.
Okay.
More than half. 54.2. Let me fix that. So why is one of the smallest demographics in this country consistently responsible for more than half the police murders in this country every year? I don't have an answer. I wish I knew. I wish I knew the answer. I don't know how to fix it, but that's just the sad, sad state of where we are. All right. I know we're running low on time. Let's move on to our first taxpayer relief shot. Again, this is where a good man or a good woman with a gun shoots and kills a thug, saving them, the taxpayers, the cost of incarceration. And here we go. Hang on.
A man trying to break into somebody's house, but investigators did not arrest the shooter. Web News Center 7's Mike Campbell live in Montgomery County. Mike, you found out investigators think this is a case where the person living in that house fired in self-defense.
Yeah, this all happened about 2 this morning, James, here in Englewood. A couple that lives just up the street here on Overlook Boulevard was hearing someone break into their home.
2 a.m., by the way. Occupied house at 2 a.m. I'm sure the guy had really good intentions, right?
They prepared to defend themselves, and the gunfire happened while one of them was on 911 lines with dispatchers.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You broke our back windows. Ma'am, where are you in the house?
That caller told dispatchers that her boyfriend heard someone trying to break in and went to grab his gun. He then went outside. You could hear a confrontation that led to gunshots as the call continued.
And do you still see the suspect?
Englewood police crews pulled up during that call. They discovered the intruder on the ground in the home's side yard. The police told us the male resident thought the intruder had left and checked his backyard shed. He then walked toward the street to check his vehicle for a break-in.
He was confronted by the suspect. The suspect came towards him. He, in fear of his life, fired 3 shots from his firearm.
Coroner's investigators identified the deceased man as 43-year-old Matthew Cullum. Englewood's police chief said his actions were unusual for a burglar.
Most burglars, if they determine that a home is occupied, once they're detected, they normally flee the area.
Follick told me the evidence gathered at the scene did support the couple's version of how the shooting happened. He said they are shook up but cooperative. They can't explain Cullum's actions.
That's why we had to wait for toxicology reports to see if anything else is factored into that as well.
All right. So, and by the way, this once again, so the woman is on the phone with 911, and before the police can get there, this thing comes to a head. So once again, when seconds count, the police are minutes away. And again, this was 2:00 in the morning. So you are your own first responder. Producer Susan, I know we're running very short of time. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
Nope. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and I will talk to you next week, and hopefully you'll get these show notes up in a couple of days.
Yep.
All right. You
Yep.
take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.